Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, Fantasy Playoffs Weekly Preview Edition. I'm your host, Jon Macri, fantasy analyst here at PFF, and joining me once again to help you get ready to take home a fantasy championship, it is the great Kate Magdziuk. Kate, you ready for this massive week?
I am ready. Got some fantasy championships online, and I'm assuming y'all do too because you're still listening with us. So, congratulations on presumably making it to your fantasy football championships, unless you have that daunted week 18 hullabaloo. Like, if
Oh,
that's the case, we gotta chat before next season. Make sure your league gets up to speed. Nobody wants to play in week 18, y'all. Week 17 is where it's at. So yeah, we're here to help. We're here to help you dominate. And I don't know. I'm personally ready to win a couple of my championships. I don't know about you, John.
yeah, ready as well. I think I got 7 fantasy championships this week, stressed about every single one of them, as usual, as everybody else is as well, right? So we're gonna try to win at least a few of those and help other people win theirs as well. And like you said, yeah, hopefully not week 18 ones. We're not doing a week 18 preview. I think Nathan will have some week 18 rankings though, so you can at least use those if you are in that mess of a championship week. But yeah, we're gonna go through it here as usual, game by game, hit on the players and matchups that are worth talking about. We'll have the timestamps in the episode description, and yeah, we're gonna get through it. But a quick ad break here from our presenting sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life. As a parent, you've had to learn so many new skills to provide for your family: how to do copious amounts of laundry, meal plan for even the pickiest eater, and now how to protect your family's financial future. Fabric by Life provides an easy shop for your family's financial needs, offering high quality term life insurance policies plus other financial solutions in one easy online hub. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies to fit your family and your budget with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy, metfabric.com/fantasy. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, Kate, let's get into it here and start where we always do, Thursday night football. This week, it's the New York Jets at the Cleveland Browns. Anywhere specifically that you want to start with this game?
Let's start on the Brown side of the ball because their offense has kind of been surging. You have Joe Flacco, the elite, who's been absolutely a powerhouse, awakening this pass attack. But you know what? Like, just as you think you can count on all of these stellar fantasy assets, they have to go up and get a huge game against the New York Jets just in time for our fantasy football championship. So I want to start talking about the Browns and figuring out exactly who on this roster you can trust. You have Joe Flacco, who's had multiple 20 plus point fantasy games, but again, going up the Jets, allowing the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Jerome Ford hasn't necessarily had a huge workload like you'd like him to, as much as he had earlier in the season. Who can you trust in this Cleveland roster, maybe outside of David Njoku and Amari Cooper, who also enters this game as banged up, dealing with a heel injury?
Yeah, that's part of the concern there for sure. Like you said, it's not a great matchup for the Browns passing attack, but yeah, I mean David Njoku's the one that I feel the most comfortable with. Amari Cooper, obviously coming off that huge week, is going to be difficult to bench. But you know, I think you're tempering expectations. You're not expecting that huge blow up game that we saw from him last week, especially going against the Jets here with Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed and company. So, yeah, I could start Amari Cooper. I could start David Njoku, but I'm not starting the running backs, for example, even though it's a little bit better of a matchup for the running backs. It's just been such a mess there. All these guys kind of working in, Pierce Strong, Kareem Hunt, all getting carries. Jerome Ford he's had single digit carries now 3 of his last 5 games, under 70 rushing yards in the last 6 as well. Nate wrote him up as a sit in his start sit column too. It's so hard to trust these Browns running backs. So yeah, it's limited options for Cleveland as good as they've been.
Yeah, agree. You're still starting Amari Cooper if he does play, of course. You can't sit Amari Cooper coming off an outing that literally broke the Browns franchise record for a season or for a game high receiving yards. It had over 200 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. You're still starting him. But again, maybe just tempering expectations in general for this Cleveland Browns offense. I do think we could see David Njoku have a solid day, especially if Amari Cooper is limited in any sort of sense, coming in, maybe from a route running perspective. Obviously, a heel injury, you probably want to be cautious of that, especially if these Browns are, obviously on a short week and they're looking to make a playoff run. So they're probably going to want to make sure that they don't do anything to put their star receiver at risk coming off that big game. On the other side of the ball, we finally had Breece Hall come back, and Breece Hall, just as fantasy managers finally had the guts to sit him, Breece Hall exploded, finishes the overall RB1 on the week. Again, like it's been a roller coaster. Running back 2 in week 14 follows that up with a running back 63 finish in PPR. Then he finishes as the running back 1. So I don't know. What are we expecting? Wide receiver or running back 64 this week? Like flip flop, flip flop. It's going to be a tough outing for Breece Hall, though, despite the fact that he's coming off such an outstanding performance.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I mean, you got to like the usage and the production from him over the 2 of the past 3 weeks, like you said. I mean, I think we kind of treat week 15 as kind of an anomaly right now, and hope that they continue to ride him the way they have. So that's definitely been encouraging. I mean, you have to start him as well, but again, not the best matchup here, going against the Cleveland Browns. But anybody else on the Jets for you that you feel particularly good about starting? I mean, I know Garrett Wilson's probably the only other option this week for that team. So where are you at with Garrett Wilson going against Cleveland?
I think it's a challenge to sit him. Obviously, it's definitely going to be dependent on some of your other options. I do not like this matchup in any way, shape, or form here for Garrett Wilson. Obviously, there's questions about the quarterback position, and it's kind of a cesspool. You have no idea what you're going to get, but you know what you're going to get from the Cleveland Browns defense, and that's excellent play from their secondary here. 30th in fantasy points given up to opposing wide receivers this season. They've just been a shutdown unit all year long. Um, Again, really dependent on if you have any other options. I do not think Garrett Wilson is a must play, but he has finished as a wide receiver too in 2 of the last 3 weeks, which, it's not like the offense has looked good for this team in that span. So fringe wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 for me.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, right? Like you said, wide receiver two last week. I think it was whatever it was, wide receiver 23 on the week. But I mean, it took a 31% target rate, like 15 targets to actually get there in a really good matchup too, against the Washington Commanders, where he was able to get 9 for 76. So a much tougher matchup this week. So I'm with you. I'm putting him more in that wide receiver 3 range as well. Um, let's go to the Saturday game. It is the Detroit Lions at the Dallas Cowboys. We'll start with
You mean the game of the week?
it very well could be. It should be a fun game. And yeah, I mean the Lions playing really well. Obviously, they clinched the NFC North, and Dallas needs a win here as well. They're fighting for a higher seed in the playoffs as well. So starting with the Cowboys side of thing, I know. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, these guys have been solid. Dak Prescott as well. So really, I mean, Tony Pollard, I don't know. He's not obviously not the wide receiver 1, right? And this is such a bad matchup against the Lions, who have been so good defending the run. They're giving up the fewest fantasy points per game to the running back position. So it's going to be tough to bench Tony Pollard, but I mean, depending on your options, it's definitely possible. I have a league where my options are James Cook and DeAndre Swift, and I'm going to lean on those guys more than Tony Pollard this week. So, for that part of it, I still think Tony Pollard can be like an RB2 just for volume and potential for a rushing touchdown, but not overly excited about him this week.
Definitely thinking any sort of productive day from this rush attack is going to have to come, via a touchdown. Like this Detroit Lions defense going to hold, I think, Tony Pollard to a very inefficient day. Just been an inefficient matchup all season long. They've allowed the fourth fewest rushing yards. Really their biggest kind of source of I don't know, like the biggest leakiness has been just in terms of allowing touchdowns, yards after contact. Fourth in the league, like explosive run play percentage, fifth in the league. Like this has been a top 5 rushing defense. And again, I think any production is going to have to come on the run. Now, the good thing is this should be a high scoring matchup. Maybe we see some targets into the end zone. Maybe we get one of those holding calls, get one of those goal line touchdowns. You never know. It's too hard to sit him having ranked 5th among running backs in total scrimmage touches this year. But again, very much tempering expectations. But for the rest of Dallas, man, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, you are firing them all up with full confidence.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you. Jake Ferguson, at least 6 targets in each of the past 4 games with at least 4 catches as well. We know he has the touchdown potential too. So yeah, that's really the only other guy I think I feel comfortable with. I mean, Brandon Cooks potentially here in a more favorable matchup this week. I know he had the touchdown last week, but not the best week in terms of yardage, which I think is going to be the risk with Brandon Cooks, but could potentially be a flex option in deeper leagues since this is one of the better matchups for wide receivers. The Lions giving up the 6th most fantasy points to the position. So how about on the Detroit side of things? Anybody that you want to start with here, particularly, because it feels like a fairly straightforward offense for the most part.
For the most part, you're starting Sam Laporta, you're starting Amon-Ra St. Brown, you're starting the running backs who, I think can both have both proven that, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, there's still enough to go around for both of these running backs in any given week to post some big time points. My biggest question heading into this week is what to do with Jared Goff. Now, obviously, we have seen some high highs from Jared Goff throughout this 2023 season. We've also seen some low lows. We've seen some turnover potential. He's the quarterback 8 on the year, but he's finished as a bot or outside of the top 20 in 2 out of the last 3 weeks. Can you trust him? It is a road game, which we know Jared Goff not as reliable on the road, even though this is a dome game, which you like to see that at least in his favor. But the Dallas Cowboys, they're playing really well at home this season, and I'm not sure there are many leagues where I have maybe the luxury of sitting Jared Goff, and it's hard to sit him with such upside, but I do think we need to temper expectations for him in this matchup on the road against this particular defense, despite all the weapons he has around him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm tempering expectations, but at the same time, yeah, have a harder time sitting him just compared to some of the other options that are out there. We know what's happened with the quarterback position this year with all the injuries and stuff. So, yeah, it's definitely a tougher call. I know Nate wrote him up as a start this week as well, and specifically citing like his numbers against man coverage, which the Dallas Cowboys are a very man heavy team over the last 2 seasons. Jared Goff has 22 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions versus man coverage compared to 22 touchdowns and 16 interceptions versus a zone coverage. So Dallas on the higher side there for man coverage rate this season. So could work into Jared Goff's favor, but Dallas also a very good man coverage defense, right? So that's where the risk comes in. And obviously that defensive line and that pass rush as well. So probably on the fringe of starting in most lineups, but yeah, he's been solid for the most part this season. So harder to bench for sure. All right, let's go to New England at Buffalo. Anybody that you want to start with among these 2 teams?
You want to start with New England because easy peasy. You start Ezekiel Elliott and then end of sentence. I can't think of anybody else in this offense that I'm comfortable in any sense of the imagination plugging into my fantasy football lineups. Now, Ezekiel Elliott in PPR leagues, he has been a top 5 running back in 2 of the last 3 weeks. You love to see that. I mean, he's kind of just he's kind of been a plug and play, like as gross as it absolutely says, like it doesn't feel good. You're not going to want to watch this game. Unless you're a Bills fan, then you're definitely probably going to watch this game. But I mean, Ezekiel Elliott's target volume, since Ramondre Stevenson has been out, has just been worthy of wide receiver production. Then you tack on the fact that he's had, 10 plus carries each of the last 4 games. Like, yeah, you're gonna take all these touches. You're gonna take all of those targets. 5 targets in each of the last 4 games. He's had 8 targets in 2 of the last 3. Boom. Like wide receiver one
Yeah.
in a running back body.
Yeah, it's been really nice to see for Ezekiel Elliott, and especially now that the path is seemingly clear for him with Ramondre Stevenson on injured reserve here. So I'm with you. I think he's probably the only one for the Patriots for me. And on the Buffalo side of things, I mean, James Cook has been just a volume monster lately. 20 carries last week. He had 70 yards. Somehow no targets or receptions, but we know that that's there for him potentially. And Joe Brady seemingly made a point here to run the ball more in this Bills offense. But as a result, we've seen it be affecting some of the receiving options for Buffalo, right? We've seen lower numbers now for Stephon Diggs and for Dalton Kincaid. So where are you at with guys like, I mean, Diggs definitely a starter still, but as far as Dalton Kincaid goes, is he inside that top 12 for you here heading into this week?
No way, Jose. I'm so sorry. I love Dalton Kincaid. Gonna be a great slot receiver slash tight end. But this Buffalo Bills defense, like let's face it, they are running the ball as well as ever. Since Ken Dorsey was fired after week 10. Their passing volume has decreased exponentially. They've had the second lowest pass play percentage from week 11 on in the entire NFL. And I think the Bills are a better team for it. Like this, we've seen some solid production from the ground, but I also think it's helped out Josh Allen in a big way, turning that ball over less, maybe forcing fewer balls than he should. And then you look at the Patriots defense, like the first time around back in week 7, Kincaid had 8 targets, 75 receiving yards, caught all 8 of them, which is great. But can you really imagine him getting another 8 targets in this game? I find it hard to believe. Since week 9, Patriots have ranked 4th in the league with a 56% defensive success rate on targets to the tight end. Dalton Kincaid is an absolute sit for me this week. Really, really hard to trust him lately, especially since the bye. He has been completely irrelevant.
Yeah, it's been a bummer, for sure. It hasn't even really been like a Dawson Knox thing with him coming off IR. It's just the Bills not throwing the ball as much. They've really leaned on the run recently. So just a change here in offensive philosophy. And I mean, this is a game where they can definitely take the lead early and end up running the ball again some more. So yeah, I'm fine starting Stephon Diggs, but I'm not starting Kincaid. I know Gabe Davis had the big week as well. We've talked about him and his success against man and zone being a pretty big indicator. But Gabe Davis, again, going against a man-heavy defense here in the New England Patriots, and one of the better ones as well. He's not somebody that I'm considering starting coming off of his strong week.
For sure.
All right, let's go to the Carolina Panthers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. So for this game, we'll start with Jacksonville. Because I know you wrote about it in the Panic or Antic column this week, talking about Travis Etienne, who has yet to clear 10 PPR points in back-to-back weeks now. Last week, only 6 carries for 12 yards, and the Jags were definitely down big. So it was harder for them to run the ball there, and they did have to pass more. So where are you at with Travis Etienne heading into this week? Are you concerned about the usage in recent weeks, or you still comfortable starting him back up here against Carolina?
I am a little bit concerned about the usage, and like honestly, you can see the great games for Travis Etienne. Like, we can call it a chicken or the egg situation here, but like in games where they've kept it close, they've been able to run the ball, and in games where they haven't kept it close, or there's been some sort of element where they fall behind, or are playing from behind. Obviously, they don't have as much time to establish the run. Travis Etienne gets less work, and we get fewer fantasy points. And that's been a big issue. And I think the biggest question is, what do we get from Trevor Lawrence? He is practicing
Yeah.
on Thursday, dealing with a shoulder injury, but it is his throwing shoulder. Um, I think it depends on, like your confidence level in ETN probably stems from your confidence level in Trevor Lawrence to keep this a close game. And I'll be honest, with the number of injuries that we've seen Trevor Lawrence sustain this year, we know he is not healthy. Even if he does play in this game, he is not 100%. I have to be concerned that like this might be a game where they're not necessarily going to be able to uh, have all that luxury and time to establish the run with Travis Etienne.
Sorry, am I back?
You're back.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, the internet is being a pain in the butt. All right, so yeah, Trevor Lawrence, I'm with you. It's definitely risky starting him this week with the injury, going against the Panthers as well, who really teams have not had to pass a lot against, and that's why they haven't allowed a lot of fantasy points to the quarterback position and to the wide receiver position. So I'm definitely uh, a little bit worried about Trevor Lawrence and starting him and really this Jaguars offense. I mean, I feel pretty good about Travis Etienne. I feel like if Lawrence isn't healthy, they should be able to run. They should be able to still, keep it a close game, even if they aren't able to pass that effectively, just because it's Carolina. But yeah, Calvin Ridley, for example, like we talked about him, that his big game was due again. And he hit it last week with 2 touchdowns and 90 receiving yards. And there's always the chance that he'll disappear again. Again, probably not going to have to throw a ton this week against Carolina. So I do worry a little bit about Calvin Ridley. He's another guy that's probably on the fringe of that wide receiver 2 or 3 range for me this week. But yeah, I think the guys that I'm most comfortable with here are Travis Etienne and potentially Evan Ingram as well for tight end.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at with this team now. Again, I feel like it could be a huge trap game, and I'm worried about this one in particular for the Jaguars. Again, where they're at. Good news for Travis Etienne. I think they should get Cam Robinson back on the offensive line this week, if I'm not mistaken, which will be helpful for him. But again, they just need to stay in this game. And with some of faults that they've, I don't know what I'm trying to say, some of the faults that they've had to this point in the season, to some of the struggles that they've had with Trevor Lawrence's health, and just myriad of factors that like there have been times where it just feels like this offense is out of sync. And I don't know, maybe it's just a feeling thing, but I feel like this could be a trap game. And I don't know. I'm nervous for everybody involved, to be quite honest, outside of Evan Ingram, who I think has proven to kind of be the safest and most consistent asset of all in this entire offense.
Yeah, I'm with you. They've definitely been concerning here. All right. How about on the Carolina Panthers side of things? Where are you at with this offense? Because Bryce Young started to show some signs of life last week, had his first like 300 plus passing game against Green Bay. It was his only one of the year though, so it's not like it's a huge sample size of success for him and the passing offense. So are you feeling any more comfortable about Bryce Young and probably Adam Thielen, I guess would be the main option to consider?
I'm not sold, to be totally honest, but in fairness, like the Jacksonville Jaguars have been a fairly easy matchup for opposing wide receivers. Like this has been not the scariest of sorts. We have Jacksonville allowing the eighth most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. I definitely feel a bit better about Thielen than I do about the quarterback situation here with Bryce Young. Still, you're I think playing with fire a little bit here. If you're looking at any of these assets outside Chuba Hubbard, who I think you're just kind of looking at as a volume play at this point. I mean, over the past 5 weeks, he's been just an absolute workhorse, 17 plus touches in every single game in that span. He scored a touchdown in 3 out of the last 5 games. I just think from like a volume standpoint, it's going to be really hard to find another running back that can sub in. Even if I think the more favorable matchup in this one against the Jaguars defense does come through the air. maybe we see Chuba Hubbard have another 5 target day or something. Get him involved as a receiver. But I do think looking to anybody outside Chuba Hubbard is probably a greater risk than it is worth the upside for any of these other assets in the offense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, just the volume, the opportunity there for Chuba Hubbard has been excellent. I know, not overly efficient, but just dominating the backfield touches there. So I'm with you. I think he's definitely a startable option at running back this week. And yeah, it's just not. I'm not ready to trust the Carolina passing offense either. So yeah,
Last time Adam Thielen caught a touchdown, December 15th, folks. December 15th.
uh,
It has been a while. It has been, or sorry, October 15th. Did I say December? It was October 15th.
October
So it's
15th. Yeah.
been just over 2 months since Adam Thielen caught his last touchdown. He's been fine from a volume perspective, especially in the last couple of weeks. 7+ targets, had 8 in last week's showing against the Packers, 94 receiving yards. Again, no touchdowns. So the upside might be limited there, but you could probably do worse in full PPR. It's just, do you need an upside play? If so, it might not be Adam Thielen this week. But if you need a guy with a relatively safe floor, relatively safe volume in full PPR, you might be looking Adam Thielen's way.
Yeah, it's not like the worst matchup or anything like that. But yeah, it's such a risk here with the Carolina offense. It could be hit and miss on any given week. And then we've seen Bryce Young have many, many games with less than 200 passing yards as well. So there is that concern of it as well. All right, let's go to the Los Angeles Rams at the New York Giants. And I mean, the Giants offense, there's not a whole lot to figure out here because I mean, Tyrod Taylor is going to be taking over at quarterback, and we're fine. I mean, fine. I say fine, but we're starting Saquon Barkley for volume purposes, in a terrible matchup for fantasy running backs this year. But again, he's going to be a tougher one to sit. I'm not starting any of the wide receivers for the Giants, and I might be starting Darren Waller as the top receiving option. I feel like he's the only one that I think I actually kind of feel okay about in a decent matchup. He had the nice snap increase last week, which we did expect, and played closer to 3/4 of the offensive snaps. He maintained that 20-ish% target rate as well. So did get a little bit more work with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback as well. So potentially a little connection there. So yeah, I'm fine starting Darren Waller if you need to, but where are you at with the Giants offense?
Tepid at best, like you mentioned, Saquon
Sure.
Barkley, a really challenging matchup in this outing here. Rams, they haven't faced a ton of running plays. They rank bottom 10 in run percentage plays faced, in large part because their offense is so good, right? This is not an offense that is putting opposing offenses in situations where they're in a close game. Like the Giants, etc., they do not have time to establish the run against this runaway Rams offense. So that's been challenging, and I don't expect that to be any different here for the Giants here in week 17. You're a bit more bullish on Darren Waller than I am. I will say that. I mean, you like to see 5 targets, 2 receptions. Like you love to see the 5 targets. You don't love to see the 2 receptions.
Right.
Philly's secondary obviously has struggled a little bit. I thought that would be a little bit, maybe one of these spots to get him going a little bit. From a game script perspective, they should have, like they were keeping it relatively close. They needed to keep throwing the ball, and um, I would have liked to see more, and that's my concern. I'm
Yeah.
not trusting Darren Waller. All of my fantasy leagues that I have made the championship in, 2 of them, I think I have Darren Waller on, and he's going to be on my bench because you know what? We've made it this far without him, and I think it's pretty hard to play a guy. He's had 1 receiving touchdown on the year so far, just 3 games with more than 50 receiving yards, more than 45 receiving yards at that. Like this hasn't had a ton of upside like we kind of projected they would for Darren Waller this year. So I'm just
Mhm.
not sure it's worth the risk for me, but I understand from a situational perspective, it should be okay.
It should be, right? But yeah, like you said, there's definitely a lot of risk involved, and there's definitely plenty of tight ends that I would start over Darren Waller as well. But yeah, just looking at this offense and trying to pick out guys that I think I'd feel okay with. I feel like this could be a week for him, but I'm with you. There's absolutely some risk there. So one of the ones that I just yeah, I'm willing to take a chance on, but I could definitely see it going either way here. But how about on the Rams side of things? Matthew Stafford, he's been solid. We know that for fantasy purposes, he's been great. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, obviously, we're not benching them, and the same thing with Kyron Williams. So, is there really anything else here that you want to talk about for the Rams offense?
No, that's it in a nutshell. Those are the
There
Rams,
we go.
baby.
Such an easy team. Love that. All right, let's go to the Arizona Cardinals at the Philadelphia Eagles. Um, let's start with another easy offense here. The Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts, obviously, starting at quarterback. AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and DeAndre Swift as well. So DeAndre Swift, you talked about him in the rushing report. 20 touches for the second straight week. He's getting these favorable matchups now that allow the Eagles to run the ball more, which is something that they definitely want to do. And that's allowed DeAndre Swift to be able to touch the ball and have productive days. And I feel like going against the Cardinals here should be another nice matchup for him. And definitely a startable option here in pretty much every league.
Yeah, I think DeAndre Swift definitely a must start here in week 17. Top 10 quarterback or running back for me on the week. In my weekly rankings, I think this could be a smash spot. Most of his down weeks have just sort of correlated with some of these matchups that got away with them. And I think that, in large part just came from, not having time to dedicate to establish the run. I don't think that'll be the case here against the Cardinals. League high fantasy points per game to the running back position should be a good matchup all around. I think Philly, very straightforward offense this week against a very suspect Arizona Cardinals defense.
Yeah, I am with you. Yeah, this should be pretty good here for the Eagles. How about for the Cardinals? So I think you talked about it last week about being excited about starting James Conner, and he came through with a really great game as a receiver, which was a nice change to see since his receiving work had really been down all year, at least compared to last year, right? So where are you at with James Conner heading into this week again in a tougher matchup against the Eagles?
It's a tougher matchup. I think from a volume perspective, really hard to sit James Conner. But notably Marquise Brown, that big day as a receiver came on the back of an absence from Marquise Brown, who's dealing with a heel
Mhm.
injury. I don't believe he's practicing just yet. Didn't practice on Wednesday. I haven't seen the report for Thursday yet. But if Marquise Brown is out, certainly I think, this could present some more opportunity for James Conner to step back in and see a greater target share. Because that's really been the worst part of James Conner's game this year. He's having, by his standards, especially a efficient year. But kind of seen a lack of upside there because the touchdowns have been kind of volatile and hasn't had a ton of work as a receiver. But if Marquise Brown is out, that should pave the way, I think, for an increased target share. Obviously, Trey McBride is a must start each and every week. He could be in for a tight end 3 or better day here in week 17. But I think that's kind of where your trust can lie, even if Marquise Brown is in this matchup. No way in God's green earth I am feeling comfortable starting him, even against this Philly secondary. Kyler Murray, I think, is a fine option, but again, not one I'm super excited to play, even though the Philly secondary has been a little bit suspect this year. I think it's hard to trust a team that doesn't have a ton of depth at this wide receiver position that I think is consistent enough to keep this team in it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and yeah, I think it's Trey McBride and James Conner as well for me. I just yeah, I don't think it doesn't look like Marquise Brown is trending in the right direction. Like you said, I haven't seen the injury report for Thursday either, but it doesn't feel great that his chances of suiting up. So yeah, I think really those are the main two, and Kyler Murray could be fine as well, but not getting too crazy with the Arizona offense.
Yeah.
How about Miami and Baltimore is next up on the list here. Which team do you want to start with here from Dolphins and Ravens?
Let's start with the Dolphins because they're kind of in
Sure.
an interesting spot. They're heading on the road this week. You have Tua, who has not been a very high upside option here for fantasy. QB 20 or worse in each of the last 3 weeks, and that's included some home games, which is generally where we've seen him perform much better. Now heads on the road to face the Baltimore Ravens in, I think, one of the toughest road environments in the National Football League there at M&T Bank Stadium. Like, I think this could be an absolute disastrous game for Tua, especially considering the fact he is going to be without Jalen Waddle this week, dealing with a high ankle sprain. You're going to look obviously at Tyreek Hill as a huge potential for a monstrous volume game. Hopefully, he's continuing to get a little bit better from his own ankle injury. Um, but I think you're starting Tyreek Hill, you're starting Raheem Mostert, Devin Achan, and that's it. But boy, let me tell you, like this Ravens defense, obviously leading the league in total DVOA. This could be, maybe a little bit of a trap game for the Miami Dolphins. Think you still have to temper expectations, even though they are the Dolphins, that
Mhm.
this might not be a super efficient game and it might not be uh, overly productive day for our fantasy assets, even though we've been relying on them all season long.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. I mean, I'm not excited about starting Tua Tagovailoa in this game. Baltimore has the best passing touchdown percentage allowed this season at just 2.6%. And Tua's definitely had his games where he hasn't been able to throw it for a ton of touchdowns, and then obviously without Jalen Waddle as well. And it looks like Raheem Mostert did not practice on Thursday either. So that's a bit concerning for me. If he doesn't play, then I'd feel a lot better about starting Devin Achan. But if Mostert does play, I think Achan's somebody that I'm definitely concerned about, right? We've seen him get better usage in games where at least Miami has had the lead. This is not the kind of matchup that I expect them to be, up big against Baltimore. So I the explosiveness obviously helps for Achan. He could break off a big play. So there's that part keeps him kind of in that flex territory. But yeah, it's just going to depend on if Mostert plays or not, where Achan's going to be in most of my lineups. So yeah, I don't know that Mostert is going to play with that DNP on Thursday here.
That definitely is interesting. And obviously, if he is out, that's great for the potential volume of Achan. Only question is, Raheem Mostert out, Jalen Waddle out. How much does that do to limit the overall ceiling of
I
this
know.
offense in a matchup that I think the overall ceiling was already limited? Now, of course, you cannot ever count out the uh, any of these options as potential plays, considering the powerhouse that we know the Dolphins are. But I think down Waddle, down Mostert, I would genuinely be concerned because those are two very fast assets. Those are two chain movers. Like that could be a big hit for a team that, I think already has not shown as much upside on the road. Woo, I'm like sweating here thinking about some of the circumstances we're heading into. I think Tyreek Hill might be the only like lock here, and that's about it.
Yeah. It's gonna be a tight matchup. I can't imagine it's gonna be an easy one here for Miami, as good as that offense is. But there's gonna be some struggling here, I think, especially with the missing pieces, like you said, and it being the Baltimore defense that they're facing. But um, how about the Baltimore offense? Because it also looks like Zay Flowers did not practice on Thursday, dealing with that calf injury. that's kind of a concern because he's somebody that has had now double-digit targets in two of the last three games, 13 targets last week. And that could be a problem for their passing offense, but could be a nice thing here for Isaiah Likely potentially. I know he had a bit of a down week last week. How you feeling about Isaiah Likely going against the Dolphins this week?
I don't mind it. We're kind of especially looking at the back of that target volume here. Obviously Zay Flowers played a huge role in that offense last week. And from a game plan perspective, we saw Lamar Jackson spread that ball far and wide. Um, and I think that was kind of the game plan. They were going to spread the ball around, spread out the defense. And I think that really worked for them here. Obviously, the Miami Dolphins defense, not exactly a pushover by any means, but I do think especially if we see Zay Flowers out or limited in this game, they're going to probably lean on Isaiah Likely as close as you can get to a like wide receiver at this point. And the Dolphins, again, not necessarily a plus matchup that you're looking to target defensively, but good enough. Good
Right.
enough.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I could very easily see Isaiah Likely be the leading receiver there here for Baltimore this week. And the other thing is the running backs, right? So the first week without Keaton Mitchell this past week, so we saw a bit of a mix here, right? Justice Hill led the team in snaps and touches. Gus Edwards got the goal line work and it's a lot of the short yardage work as well. So where are you at with these running backs? Do you have any interest in starting either one of them this week? And if you have to start one, which one do you prefer out of Baltimore?
Ugh, this is the challenge. Um, Talked about this also in the rushing report this week because I've been trending the snap counts, the touches all season long, and it really has been a hodgepodge. Obviously, you had Justice Hill lead the team last week, snaps, touches. The margin was pretty close in terms of touches, but I still give the edge very slightly to Gus Edwards here, who's gotten the majority of the work in most weeks throughout the season. Also dominating touches inside the goal line, which, I think to start the year, we kind of thought that was Gus or Justice Hill's role. It's definitely swayed back in Gus Edwards' favor. We even saw that last week. Saw 100% of the goal line work. I think those valuable touches do belong to Gus Edwards at this point. So I'm going to give him my go ahead here,
Mhm.
but it's pretty close.
It is close. Yeah, it's definitely close. And I think it's Gus Edwards as well. Like, just because again, the goal line work and we know that this Baltimore offense can at least get into scoring position. So there's obviously that opportunity there for him as well. So yeah, it just again, it's a shared workload is never ideal, obviously for running backs, but especially in a matchup that's not an easy one. But yeah, if I had to pick one, it's Gus Edwards, but not guys that I'm starting necessarily in like the top 24 or anything like that.
Yeah, you're
Are,
kind of hoping for a touchdown and you're saying your prayers.
yeah, yeah, exactly right. So let's go to Atlanta and Chicago here. Um, Chicago, speaking of like shared running back usage, I mean, it didn't happen too much last week because Khalil Herbert dominated the touches, at 20 carries, 122 yards, but there was no Deontay Foreman in the lineup last week either. So we're going to assume it seems like Deontay Foreman could be back this week. Are you expecting a similar workload for Khalil Herbert, or are you expecting back to that three-headed monster that we've seen from Chicago quite a bit this season?
I feel like we're gonna get another ugly three-headed monster, much like the Ravens backfield. Like I feel like
Yeah.
I've done my best to trend and identify some potential giveaways about who could be the guy. And no, when all three of these guys have been active, it's kind of been a hodgepodge. And to be honest, I think that's like to their detriment because I think they've got three running backs on their roster who would all probably excel with more touches
Mhm.
and like to get in rhythm. Deontay Foreman and Khalil Herbert, especially, I think, really. solid rhythm runners who can kind of wear down opposing defenses. And I think you're doing all of them a disservice by not necessarily getting any of them heavily involved in any one game script. I do think you're kind of playing roulette with this one. I will say I'm in a dynasty league and I'm in the championship here. I have all three of them on my roster. And I just made a mega trade. I traded T. Higgins and Devonta Smith for Christian McCaffrey, who's got the matchup of the week. I have to maybe, if unless I'm able to get another deal done before Sunday, I might have to actually start one of three running backs. Who should I start and why? Help me, Jon.
Oh man, yeah, that's tough. But I do like the play for Christian McCaffrey to hopefully help you get the championship. But I feel like I'd lean Khalil Herbert. Again, more just because he looked good last week, right? And that was kind of the main thing. And you look at the most recent sample size of what they've done, and they leaned on Khalil Herbert quite a bit. We saw that earlier in the year as well. So maybe coming back to him. I feel like Herbert would be the guy that I would prefer if I have to choose. Even in full PPR, I know Roshan Johnson getting some of the passing down work as well. I think that, the more steady, stable usage to kind of bank on here, if I have to pick one, would be Herbert. So, yeah, I fully expect Deontay Foreman to get like 15 carries this week, but yeah, hopefully
Well,
not.
I actually had Herbert in my lineup, so I'm glad you kind of confirmed my bias. Coming off a really solid outing, like you mentioned, his 79.3 rushing grade, ranked seventh among running backs in week 16. 20 total carries, 112 rushing yards. Like, he had himself a day. And
Yeah.
I do think from a statistical standpoint, he has had the best season among these running backs. We just need the Chicago Bears to um, do it. Do it. Play Khalil Herbert for me. Do it for me.
Do it for Kate. Yes, absolutely. And then the other piece of the Bears offense to talk about, I think, because I know you wrote about it in Panic or Antic as well. DJ Moore, a couple down games here, right? So just 18 yards in week 16 against Arizona, had the quieter game against Cleveland as well, which that one a little bit more understandable. So where are you at with DJ Moore after his surprisingly low game against the Cardinals?
I'm a little worried. This is an Atlanta Falcons defense that, they've had the second highest contested target percentage in the league dating back to week 9. Like, this has been a really challenging matchup. There's been two wide receivers since week 9 that have scored 10 or more fantasy points in half PPR formats. None of them have exceeded 15 fantasy points. Like, this has been a high risk, low reward matchup. The Falcons defense has allowed the fifth fewest catches, 10th fewest receiving yards, and they have allowed just one single touchdown to opposing wideouts since week 9. Like, it's not a good matchup. And I'm worried on all fronts, honestly, about this Bears defense. I'm not even excited about my Khalil Herbert, because even then he's got a tough matchup against this Falcons run defense. I think the Bears could be in for a challenging day. I think this could be one of those matchups that favors Cole Kmet. And maybe we see a little bit less DJ Moore than we'd like, but just on the whole, DJ Moore been a very boomer bust wide receiver this year. And I think this is heading in for a bust week. The Falcons defense is no slouch, baby.
Mhm. Yeah, they've been good. So yeah, tempering expectations for DJ Moore. And then on the Atlanta side of things, we did get a nice bounce back week for Mr. Bijan Robinson last week, and did it a lot as a receiver, right? 7 catches for 50 yards. I'm pretty sure he led the team in receiving yards last week as well. So feel fine about starting him again. The rest of the offense, though, I do not feel fine about. Guys like Drake London, who hasn't had more than 40 receiving yards or more than 3 receptions in back-to-back games now, makes him really hard to trust. You got Taylor Heineke at quarterback. I don't know.
They're on
I
the
feel like,
road, like in
yeah, there's
Soldier Field.
so
It's going to be
much.
near freezing temperatures. Like,
Ugh.
this whole matchup is going to be, I think, really gross. The only saving grace, though, I do want to give a little vote of confidence, because there's one player on the Atlanta Falcons offense that I am kind of bullish on this week, and it is Bijan Robinson, who
Mhm.
you look at the Chicago Bears matchup, you look at their ability to stop the run, like they do rank 12th in fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, but it comes with work in the receiving game. On the ground, this has been a very inefficient matchup against the Bears. But we're seeing Bijan Robinson come off his most involved day as a receiver with Taylor Heineke, saw 10 targets, was essentially this team's wide receiver one. And the Chicago Bears, that has been their greatest weakness. I do think this is a smash spot start for Bijan Robinson. Keep riding the flames. I know it's been a bumpy ride this year, but I think this is a good spot.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I like it. All right, let's do a quick ad break here from our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. I ended up going with a defensive prop because I saved this till the last second and forgot to look them up. But I went with CJ Mosley going over 7.5 total tackles tonight against the Cleveland Browns. CJ Mosley is a top 12 linebacker in tackle efficiency this season. The Browns are giving up the most tackles per game to the linebacker position. I know it's been a little bit less here with Joe Flacco at quarterback, but CJ Mosley 7.5 on 100% of snaps is still a nice number there for a linebacker. So that's the one that I like. Kate, I forgot to ask you, did you have a prize pick that you liked this week?
Yes, I'm going all in on Kyron Williams, baby.
Nice.
More than 94 and a half rushing yards here over the last 5 games, averaging 120.2 rushing yards per game. He has smashed the over in 4 out of those 5 games fairly easily. And now I do think this, again, should be a favorable spot against the run. You have the Detroit or the New York Giants, who rank fourth in rushing yards allowed, rank top four in, explosive run percentage, yards per attempt. Like, this has been a great matchup against the run, and Kyron Williams is red hot. I love more than 94.5 rushing yards.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, I'm a big Kyron Williams fan. I think I had him on our prize picks last week and then he let me down because I had like over 18.5 receiving yards and he didn't even have one receiving yard. But I like going for the rushing total here. That feels much better to me as well. So yeah, go to prizepicks.com/PFF fantasy. Use code PFF fantasy for first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/PFF fantasy. Use code PFF fantasy for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, let's go. Tennessee Titans at the Houston Texans. CJ Stroud, it looks like he will be back in the lineup this week. At least he's trending in the right direction. Missing 2 games with the concussion. So feeling pretty good about CJ Stroud and potentially Nico Collins as well, who's also battling injury, but potentially trending in the right direction too. So I like those two specifically. I'm not as excited about somebody like a Noah Brown, especially if Nico Collins is back in the lineup. I just think he's just hasn't been as effective against man coverage. The Titans have been, a bit league average in man coverage, but really not trying to lean too heavily into the second wide receiver here this week because there's other guys that I like on the Houston offense and I can't love them all, right? I like Devin Singletary, I like Dalton Schultz a little bit as well. So where are you at with this Houston offense? Is there anyone that stands out for you that you like?
All the players you mentioned, I do think you still need to go back to considering to start Devin Singletary. Had a down week last week, only 12 touches, and you want more work, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's be real. You want more work, especially coming off a 30 touch outing. But remember, we just had Devin Singletary play this Tennessee Titans off our defense a couple of weeks ago at 30 touches for 170 scrimmage yards. Like, absolutely dominated. And now you have the Houston Texans at home. I don't expect him to have 30 total touches, but this is, a matchup that he's already shown the ability to exploit. And I think that, you know, yeah, you could do a bit worse than Devin Singletary, especially considering he's been relatively involved as a receiver.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Singletary a fair bit as well. And like you said, that last game against Tennessee was definitely encouraging. But we've also seen them, him have those nicer fantasy days when they run the ball more. This should be a game where they're able to at least, I think, get some lead or at least keep it close. They're not. I don't think I'd expect them to trail behind, especially with C.J. Stroud back in the lineup. So should be nice involvement there for Devin Singletary. How about Dalton Schultz? He's been pretty solid here, even without CJ Stroud in the lineup. He's caught 12 passes now for 119 yards over his last two games combined. Had a fine outing for a tight end last time they played Tennessee. I think 58 receiving yards, four catches. So would he still be a starter for you? Because on paper, the Titans are giving up the fewest fantasy points per game to the tight end position. So I'm curious where you'd have Dalton Schultz ranked this week.
Low and tight end one, I'm not like overly excited about the matchup necessarily, but especially considering the loss of Tank Dell for the season, like I think this is still there's still plenty of opportunity for Dalton Schultz to be like a pseudo wide receiver two for this team. I think again, fine start, not overly excited to get him in my lineup, but I definitely think there are worst options out there.
Yeah. Yep, I'm in the exact same boat. On the Tennessee Titans, we have Derrick Henry, who did have a nice bounce back, relatively good bounce back last week, where he got 19 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown. We've still like the volume there. And DeAndre Hopkins, I know two catches in back-to-back weeks only, but the week prior to last, he had at least 9 targets from Will Levis at quarterback. It seems like Will Levis is pushing to get back this week as well. So I think that helps DeAndre Hopkins' case here to still make it into starting lineups. But I think outside of Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins, for the most part, maybe Tajay Spears in a flex role, especially if the Titans fall behind and he gets some involvement there as a receiver. Those kind of feel like the only Titans players worth talking about. How about you?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do think you can consider Tajay Spears 10 plus touches in each of the last 4 weeks. Hasn't necessarily had a ton of upside, but like you mentioned, if this is a game that maybe gets a little bit out of hand, we've kind of seen those be the roles where Tajay Spears takes over a little bit and could be an interesting asset, especially considering you've got a number of key assets back here for the Houston Texans offense. Might force a little bit of scoring and maybe a little bit of catch up there from the Titans. So definitely okay with him in case of emergency, but
Mhm.
again, not like super excited.
Yep. Yeah, I'm exactly with you. Let's go to the Indianapolis Colts and the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean,
Mm.
yeah, this is a strange one here because Michael Pittman was a limited participant on Wednesday. Um, he's dealing with that concussion, right? So he was ruled out late last week because he was cleared and then he started experiencing symptoms again. I mean, a limited participant is not like the most encouraging thing, but it's at least nice to see him back at practice. Haven't seen anything for Thursday. I don't know if you have, but I feel like if Michael Pittman clears and if he's active, he feels like somebody that is going to be in starting lineups. I don't think I'm benching him for any reason if he's active. So, yeah, it's Pittman and Jonathan Taylor for me. I don't know that there's anybody else for Indianapolis. How about you?
No, I think that's kind of what you're looking at this point. Like it's probably Pittman or bust. Just been
Yeah.
such a high volume option that it really kind of hard to turn away from that at this point. Not a ton of options I'd consider over him, but outside of that, yeah, you're starting Jonathan Taylor. It's Jonathan Taylor, it's Michael Pittman, and that's about it. Um, what do we do about the Raiders though? Because I there's been so many ups and downs for this Raiders team. Obviously, like hard to go into, week 17 feeling all that confident about the passing volume. Obviously, this defense has been so dominant
Mhm.
since we've seen Pierce take over as head coach, interim head coach. But I, hmm, it's it's tough because you can't imagine a world where you're going to be sitting DeAndre or Devontae Adams. Like I don't. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I'm really struggling with what to do with this Raiders offense. And then obviously you have Josh Jacobs, who they were hoping to get back last week from injury. He didn't end up playing, but like if he's active, what is your trust level? Like I don't know what to make of this offense, especially given the strengths of the defense and the way that they're playing right now. It hasn't put the offense in a position where they need to do much.
Yeah, it's been they've been an interesting team recently under Antonio Pierce, and they've been competitive as well. But I think if Josh Jacobs plays, I know he didn't practice on Wednesday. I haven't seen anything for Thursday. I feel okay about him just from a volume perspective, but more in that kind of low end RB2 range. I think they would still lean on him quite a bit. Otherwise, potentially Zamir White in a similar role. Yeah, Devontae Adams, I'm not benching, but I am tempering expectations. The Colts are not an easy matchup. They're allowing the 13th most yards per attempt through the air. Kansas City was definitely a tougher matchup for them. So we saw lower numbers from the receiving group there. So they're about an average matchup. Again, they're a low passing touchdown rate as far as allowing touchdowns go. They're the sixth best in the league in that regard. Indianapolis is. So from that standpoint, it makes it a little bit harder to believe that the Raiders are going to be able to score touchdowns on them through the air. So yeah, just tempering expectations for the receiving options, Devontae Adams and especially Jacoby Myers, more of a flex in deeper leagues.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but man, I'm gonna have nightmares. If like that's my barometer. I always say my barometer is if I would have nightmares for benching a guy when he
Yeah.
goes off, that's the sign that I need to get him in my starting lineup. And I would have nightmares if I benched Devontae Adams, even coming off a one catch for four receiving yard game.
Oh gosh, yeah.
It was
Yeah,
bad.
it's I know it's definitely scary. There's especially this week, right, where everything like the entire season relies on this week and these guys performing well and yeah, those bust weeks are just overly painful, especially this week. So yeah, we got to hope for the best here for Devontae Adams and company, but not going to be an easy one. The New Orleans Saints at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Where do you want to start with these two teams?
Oh, let's start with the Buccaneers. How about that? Baker, the touchdown maker.
Yes.
He's been kind of chugging along like he's been a streamable asset. He's obviously got a very strong connection with Mike Evans, which honestly has kind of made him fantasy relevant for the first time in his career. We've really never seen him be overly productive as a fantasy quarterback. I think again, kind of a fine streamer if you're in dire straits. He's the quarterback 12 on the year. A quarterback 13 or better in each of the last 3 weeks. He's vibing right now. And
Mhm.
from a vibe perspective, we know Baker Mayfield, again, all about vibes and the underdog mentality. They are paying, they're playing for their season right now. And
Yeah.
I think obviously with the narratives that like the Buccaneers, don't belong. Obviously, they're a little bit out of place in the top four seeds in the NFC. I feel like he's gonna have something to say about that. So I like uh, Baker Mayfield as like a low end QB1 this week. I think the matchup's all right, not a great matchup, but again, with the connection he has with Mike Evans right now, I think it's just kind of hard to sit. And the way that he's been able to utilize Rashad White as a receiver, Rashad White obviously a must start top five option every single week. Um, Chris Godwin, less excited about, of course, because he hasn't had as much of that touchdown upside as we'd like to see. Although he's looked a little bit better in recent weeks. So like what's your temperature check here on Chris Godwin in this must-win situation?
Yeah, I'm with you because I like the Bucks offense and I like what Baker Mayfield's been doing this season. So I'm kind of trusting him. I mean, he's got 31 targets over his last three games combined,
That's what's
basically like
crazy.
10 per game, right? So really nice numbers there for Chris Godwin. And he's had his his ups and downs this season, but I feel like you said, this is a must-win game for the Bucks, the divisional game going against the Saints. They're at home. I feel like I can trust Chris Godwin in that kind of low end wide receiver 2 range, along with guys like Mike Evans and Rashad White, who are definitely not leaving lineups. So yeah, I'm willing to give Chris Godwin another start this week.
Perfect.
And then on the New Orleans Saints side of things, Derek Carr, potentially a streaming option this week. We've talked about him quite a bit on the waiver wire show, and liking his fantasy schedule here in the playoffs, and delivered last week on Thursday night against the Rams. Has another decent matchup here against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are giving up the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So as far as this Saints passing offense goes, because we're starting Alvin Kamara, what's your comfort level with guys like Derek Carr and Rashid Shaheed?
I actually really like this spot for Derek Carr and Rashid Shaheed. Their connection, deep in particular, like it's been something really special here this season. And I don't know what it is in particular in half PPR formats. 4 of the top 6 performances from a wide receiver in a single week have come from Rashid Shaheed this year in that Saints offense. Not Chris Olave. Chris Olave's had 2. Rashid Shaheed has had more top performances this year than Chris Olave, which again, half PPR formats. But all of that stems from this high upside option as a touchdown scorer, as an absolutely dominant deep receiver. I mean, we're talking about Rashid Shaheed, who, again, he's playing as his team's wide receiver 2, technically, but like even on any given week, it might be, Alvin Kamara that kind of functions in that wide receiver 2 role. And yet still, Rashid Shaheed ranks 3rd in total receiving yards on targets of 20 plus air yards in the entire league. That is only behind Tyreek Hill and Amari Cooper. Now, obviously the Bucs secondary has been suspect. Like, I think this could be a really sneaky option here for people that are in dire need of a high upside option for the coming week. I
Yeah.
don't know.
No, I'm with you. I like Rashid Shaheed, and I like what he's done since Michael Thomas has been out as well, right? He's earning targets as more than just a deep threat, and Derek Carr has established a connection with him as well. And it's a decent matchup here going against the Bucks, who I know Carlton Davis, their second corner there, is dealing with a concussion, and he's questionable this week. So there's opportunity here for this Saints passing offense to kind of keep things going in the same kind of way that they were able to last week against the Rams. I think we could potentially see some fireworks here from the Saints offense, which is weird to say with Derek Carr at
Yeah.
quarterback, but yeah, I like the potential. Um, all right, let's go on to the San Francisco 49ers at the Washington Commanders is the next one up. 49ers and Commanders. We'll start with, the 49ers offense, because it's just a super easy offense to figure out, right? Like, Washington's given up the most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. So feel pretty good about Brock Purdy. I know, really down week last week, but going against that Baltimore defense that we just talked about not too long ago, it definitely, Washington is not the Baltimore defense. So feeling better about Brock Purdy and his receiving weapons, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, obviously Christian McCaffrey as well, and George Kittle. So yeah, anybody that you're, I guess, worried about starting for the San Francisco 49ers?
No, fire them up with full confidence. I'm not even sure the Washington Commanders play defense anymore.
No.
This is going to be like, you couldn't ask for a better matchup to follow up that brutal game against the Ravens, because I think this is going to be a cure for the heart, a cure for the inefficiency, a cure for the turnovers. Like, this offense is going to be just fine, and you're firing them all up with full confidence.
Yep, I am with you. And then on the Washington side, no longer Sam Howell at quarterback. It was fun while it lasted. We
Mhm.
loved Sam Howell. Unfortunately, just hasn't got it done the last few weeks. So the team has turned to Jacoby Brissett, who has looked good in his limited action here. He's had to come in the last two games in relief and has done a decent job. So you gotta like the potential there for. Well, I mean, you don't have to. This is not a good matchup, right? This is Jacoby Brissett and going against the 49ers. We got maybe a Chase Young revenge game here against his former team. But as far as the Washington fantasy options, I don't know that there's any that I really love this week, despite the change at quarterback and how well Jacoby Brissett has played on that small sample size. How about you?
No, it's definitely been a small sample size. And I think from the perspective of like this being a one and done week, you lose and you are out for the season. Really hard to trust any of these options, especially kind of seeing like when he comes in a spot start after, the game's already kind of started out, he hasn't had those first team reps in practice. What does it look like when he's actually getting those first team reps? What does it actually look like when they're planning this offense for him? Um, I don't know that I want to fire up his assets knowing that I don't know, it might not look exactly the same as what we've seen so far when he's coming in an
Mhm.
intermittent role with no planning. Like it might not be exactly what we see. And to counter that point, like this is going to be a defense that also now knows that they are game planning for Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. They sometimes when there is a quarterback switch mid-game or otherwise, like the defense might not be prepared to take on, quarterback XYZ. They've prepped a game plan for a totally different passer. No, like this is going to be a situation where they know exactly who they're planning on. And I don't know, not to say that I don't love Jacoby Brissett as a quarterback because we saw him succeed and excel beyond all expectations with the Cleveland Browns just last year.
Mhm.
But just again, really hard to trust these receivers in a crucial game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, if you have to, I think Terry McLaurin it would be like a flex option. I think at the very best, though, right? We're not expecting him to be, the Terry McLaurin, the must start Terry McLaurin that he's been in years past or anything like that. It's just not a great matchup. And then it just gets weird at the running back position because Chris Rodriguez placed on injured reserve. It looks like Brian Robinson was a limited participant in practice on Wednesday. Haven't seen anything for Thursday, but again, you're facing the 49ers now. It's not a great matchup for running backs. I don't know that really any of these guys are going to be worth starting this week going against San Francisco.
Yeah, I think that just about covers it.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Seattle Seahawks. Kate, it has been a roller coaster, I imagine, being a Pittsburgh Steelers fan over there. Coming off a big win, though, so we're on the high right now. How are you feeling about this Pittsburgh offense going against the Seattle Seahawks? Any more optimism about some of the fantasy options? Because it's been, again, the roller coaster of wins and losses has translated to the roller coaster of guys that we can trust in the Steelers offense as well for fantasy purposes.
The only guy I know, George Pickens, monster game
Yeah.
last week, probably on all of your benches if he was on your
Yep.
roster. I don't think I've seen a single person on my timeline or Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I don't think I've seen a single person that actually started George Pickens. Even in my deepest dynasty league, I faced my opponent with George Pickens on his bench, and I thank my heavenly stars for that because I am now in my championship and we can move forward. But I am not expecting the same type of fireworks. Like Pittsburgh, there are only two games of the season where they have looked capable on offense, have both come against the Cincinnati Bengals, who dealing with injuries, didn't have Cam Taylor Britt, didn't have DJ Reader. Like this has been a defense that, especially in the second half of the season, has struggled. The Seattle Seahawks are a much better and high quality defense than the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, just between the knowledge that you have from Bobby Wagner over the middle of the field, you have Reek Woolen, Devin Witherspoon. Like this is a terrifying secondary. Julian Love, like playing fantastically well. I think this defense could be a lot of trouble, a lot more trouble than the Pittsburgh Steelers saw in week 16. It's going to be a road game. They haven't necessarily traveled out west all that successfully in recent years. We saw, a couple of plus games against, the Raiders and the Rams, and both of those have been surprises. I'm a little worried that this one's going to catch up to them.
Yeah, definitely possible, right? And I'm not in love with a lot of the Steelers options this week either, George Pickens included. I probably like George Pickens more than Deontay Johnson. We've seen Deontay Johnson's playing time kind of decrease a little bit since Matt Canada has stopped being the offensive coordinator here, and under Eddie Faulkner, I think is his name is right. It took over at offensive coordinator. We've actually seen. Deontay Johnson really only playing in 11 personnel, or playing a little bit more in 11 personnel, but less in other situations, right? Where even Miles Boykin is playing more snaps than him in different personnel groupings, right? So just limiting Deontay Johnson's potential for production as well. So for that part of it, I definitely feel a little bit more concerned for Deontay and even George Pickens. I think we touched on it last week how both Pickens and Deontay Johnson have been much more effective against man coverages than zone coverages, but going against oh my God, the Seahawks here. The Seahawks are one of the more zone heavy defenses in the NFL as well, right? So these guys haven't performed greatly against zone coverage. So I just, again, tempering expectations for the entire Steelers offense. And that includes the backfield as well, because I know we saw Najee Harris take over the backfield last week, but it was pretty close as far as snaps go. So I don't know how much I'm trusting them this week. And probably for the most part, they're really just deep league options for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Seattle, their one kind of weakness, I think that the
Mhm.
Steelers might actually be able to exploit a little bit is the run. But of course, you have Najee Harris, who has taken over the backfield more significantly, I'd say in recent weeks, as opposed to Jalen Warren, who we kind of saw that midseason surge from and then has kind of quieted down a little bit since. But you're still looking at Najee, who kind of dominates that work in, the red zone inside the five. I think, that could be, one potential spot for them to exploit. So, like, if I had to start one Pittsburgh Steeler, it'd probably be Najee Harris, but I'm not going to be overly excited about that because I don't know, with their defensive weaknesses, with the number of weapons that Seattle has on their offensive side of the ball, how much time are they going to have to establish the run? I'm not all that confident.
Yeah, it's definitely risky here with this Steelers offense, which we've seen all season, right? So if you can afford to avoid them for the most part, I typically am. But on the Seahawks side of things, I mean, I feel fine about starting Kenneth Walker and DK Metcalf. A little bit, inconsistent production from Tyler Lockett always has him kind of iffy for me. I feel like, again, looking at kind of the man zone report for this week, Tyler Lockett hasn't been as effective against man coverage as Jackson Smith and Jigba. The Steelers definitely one of the more man heavy defenses in the league, and Smith and Jigba second on the team as far as target rate goes against man coverage, second on the team in fantasy points per route run. So I have them fairly close. I could kind of consider them a little bit closer this week, and wouldn't mind starting Smith and Jigba over Tyler Lockett either. But we've seen the big games from Lockett as well, so I think he could be a fine start if you need to. But yeah, I just have a preference for JSN this week, which I think we talked about last week as well. But they all perform pretty well. So where are you with this the Seattle offense?
Yeah, I kind of like Smith and Jigba. Obviously, we've seen Pittsburgh kind of struggle across the middle of the field. It's been a area where they've been able to exploit the Steelers defense a little bit, especially considering their injuries at linebacker this season. They did give some interesting looks to the Cincinnati Bengals offense here last week. So we'll see if they kind of keep up. They had a little bit more creativity, I think, in the way that they covered the middle of the field. So if they can continue to keep that up, um, maybe they do need to look to the outside position. That might be more of a Tyler Lockett game. If let's say Joey Porter is covering, DK Metcalf, he's been pretty locked down when he's not forcing penalties. So we'll see how that kind of comes together. But I think I don't know. You know what? I'm actually going to flip the script here. I'm feeling a Tyler Lockett game. I think I am.
Okay. Yeah,
Mm.
that's fair for sure. I don't
Mm.
mind it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes when you write it and you digest it and then you speak it out loud,
Right.
you know, you come to some different conclusions here. Yeah, I'm feeling a Tyler Lockett game, baby.
There
Let's
we
go.
go. There we go. All right. I like it.
Well, not let's go because I'm a Steelers fan. So don't go,
Right,
Tyler
right. Not
Lockett.
too
Don't go.
crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
No, no.
Just enough where he can
Mhm.
help fantasy owners and then still the Steelers end up winning the game somehow, right?
Yeah, that's all I
Um
ask. Not that difficult, guys.
yeah, yeah. All right, let's go to the Los Angeles Chargers at the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos have benched Russell Wilson and will be starting Jarrett Stidham at quarterback. Cortland Sutton has been arguably the best fantasy option for the Denver Broncos. He did not practice on Wednesday with a concussion. We saw him obviously leave last game very early. I don't know that there's going to be a lot of Broncos players that I'm trusting here. Do you have anybody that you actually like from the Broncos offense this week?
No.
No. Yeah.
I mean, like, can you Jerry Judy, if Cortland Sutton's out, maybe he's like a volume play. Um, this is honestly a matchup, John, that I'm trying to avoid on both sides of the ball. I
Yeah.
think both of these offenses, they're missing a lot of key players here potentially. Um, it's really hard to envision this being an overly productive game from a yardage perspective, from a scoring perspective. Uh, again, maybe Jerry Judy is a volume play at best, but I'm not seeing any of these options necessarily having the highest upside. Theoretically, the Chargers have been a great matchup for opposing quarterbacks, opposing wide receivers, but again, how much do you trust it with the quarterback change, with the injury to Cortland Sutton? I just don't know.
Yeah, I just don't. I really don't. Jerry Judy's been really poor all year long, and now you get Jared Stidham, a complete unknown, really at quarterback. I mean, Javonte Williams is another guy that I'm just not trusting. He's been inefficient. We're also seeing Jaleel McLaughlin getting more work. I just don't know that this is an offense that I want to mess with in championship week. If I can afford to, I'm avoiding all of them. And I'm with you. I think the Chargers are kind of in the same boat for the most part. I mean, Austin Eckler had, 15 carries for 65 yards last week, which yay, good for him. But it's still hard to trust these guys with that offense, and especially with Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer. Both of them didn't practice on Wednesday. I don't know what their status is for this week. There's just so many question marks where I'm at the point where the guy that I probably feel best about in this entire game is Gerald Everett, who has seen at least 8 targets or has seen exactly 8 targets in 3 straight games with Easton Stick at quarterback. He's had at least 5 catches in each of those 3 games for about 40 yards or so. I don't mind Gerald Everett in a matchup where the Denver Broncos are allowing the most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. So maybe that's the one guy that I'm actually comfortable with this week. But outside of that, I don't know that there's a lot here on either side of the ball.
Yeah, again, just one of those matchups that I'm probably gonna scroll over in most of my lineup decisions. Like I just don't know that there's gonna be a lot of fruit on the tree in this one, and that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Hopefully, we could find some more in this next game, which is the Cincinnati Bengals at the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll start with the Kansas City side of things. So, where are you at with Patrick Mahomes? Because I know you wrote about him in Panic or Antic as well. He's finished as QB 15 or worse in 5 of his last 6 games, which is definitely concerning for a player that a lot of people drafted as their QB1 this season. Any concern for Patrick Mahomes heading into championship week, or is he still going to be in your starting lineup? No question about it.
I love Patrick Mahomes this week.
There we
Like
go.
we talked about the Bengals defense, and the success the Steelers have found against them. Like it has been offensive palooza against this Bengals defense. They've been giving up explosive plays left and right. It's been a super efficient matchup for opposing passers. I think this is a great spot start, especially for, this team that needs this win desperately. Like
Yeah.
obviously their struggles this year, the Chiefs struggles, they fall on the offense, and this has got to be something that they need to get right over the next 2 weeks. They are very much like, the Raiders, they've got all of the momentum in the world. They need to close out with 2 wins, and they could win the division. Like that's how dire these straits are. So I do think this is, in a must-win spot against this defense in particular in Arrowhead. I think it's a very, very favorable matchup. Now, we'll have to keep an eye on the availability. Cam Taylor-Britt might be back in this one. That'll be a huge gain there for the secondary. But overall, I think that this could be just a smash start. I love Rashee Rice. I think, again, smash start. And Travis Kelce, even, who
Yeah.
kind of struggled as of late. Cincinnati Bengals have allowed the second most fantasy points per game to tight ends this year. Might be an opportunity to kind of get that connection, revitalize that just a little bit. I really like all the Kansas City assets in this game overall.
Yeah, I'm with you. I guess the other thing to keep an eye on would be Isaiah Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Both of these guys didn't practice today on Thursday, which I don't know how serious it is for Isaiah Pacheco, if he's still going to go or not. But I didn't think it would be that bad to the point where he's at risk of missing this game. But we'll see. Jerick McKinnon's already on injured reserve as well, so I mean, I think it's LaMichael Pirine is the only other option there for the Kansas City running back. So I think, yeah, we're really hoping for Isaiah Pacheco to get back after the injury last week. So I'm
You're
with you though.
hoping
The
for it,
Kansas City,
but in the concussion protocol, you do have to
yeah,
be concerned that it's already Thursday and he has not returned to practice, still a non-participant entirely. Now, Clyde Edwards-Helaire also on the injury report dealing with an illness, but he's
right.
got a few days, so hopefully he's fine. But what's your level of confidence in a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who might very well be on your waivers at this point in the season if we don't see Pacheco clear protocol?
Yeah, if we're assuming that, yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets back for this game, then I'd feel pretty good about him. I've liked the usage from him with Isaiah Pacheco out of the lineup, and I think there's definitely potential there, especially with Jerick McKinnon out as well. So I'd be fine starting Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Probably be looking to put him into a lineup somewhere where I have him on a bench right now from using him in previous weeks. He could definitely be an option for me, I think.
Cool.
Um, Losing the internet as always. All right, let's move to the Cincinnati Bengals side of things. Cincinnati, Jamar Chase did practice on Thursday. It does seem like Jamar Chase will be back this week, which is nice to see. That could help the likes of Jake Browning. Um, I mean, feeling fine about starting Jamar Chase. Obviously, if he's playing, then you're starting him. T. Higgins is another guy too, though I feel like has earned his starting spot pretty comfortably in lineups over the past few weeks. 2 touchdown game 2 weeks ago. He had the 140 yards and a touchdown last game. So I don't think we're benching T. Higgins even with Jamar Chase back. I think both of these guys would be options, at least as far as I'm concerned. Where are you at with the Bengals passing offense?
Yeah, I don't love this matchup just in general.
Hmm.
Obviously, like the Kansas City Chiefs, their defense has been kind of the shining star this season, which is such a change from years prior. But hey, I'm here for it. They've been a really fun unit to watch. But interestingly, also you have on the injury report L'Jarius Sneed, who I believe is dealing with a calf injury. So keep an eye on his availability. If he's out in this game, I do think that's a huge break in the Bengals' favor, which could make all of these assets just a little bit more viable. Jake Browning, I think, is also a fine option at streamer. I'm not, again, excited, but definitely the tiebreaker there is going to be whether or not Jamar Chase is back in that lineup, as to whether or not I think you could maybe trust Jake Browning as like a low end QB1, mid range QB2. Like I think you're probably looking at like somewhere between QB10 to QB16 is where I think Browning will fall, but a lot harder to trust if you don't have Jamar Chase in that lineup.
Yeah, you want Jamar Chase in the lineup for sure, for Jake Browning. But yeah, I'm with you. I think there's potential, at least for volume passing there, and that's really the main thing that we're going to want from Browning. And then he's got the receivers, obviously talented enough to help him get in the end zone and build up points. So I'm with you. I'm starting Jake Browning in some super flex leagues as well, this week, and feeling fine about him, against Kansas City, who are a good defense. But like you said, there's potential there this week. Anybody else for Cincinnati for you or Kansas City? All
Nah.
right. Final game of the week. It is the Green Bay Packers at the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday Night Football. There's no Monday Night Football game this week. But starting with, let's start with Minnesota, because Minnesota, another team that has a quarterback change this week. No Nick Mullins. He had the four interception game last week. Not good. Jaron Hall is going to be starting at quarterback. So I don't know. I mean, Justin Jefferson, obviously, we're starting him. Jordan Addison didn't practice on Wednesday. I don't know if he's going to practice on Thursday. TJ Hawkinson's on IR. This might be Justin Jefferson, and I feel fine about Ty Chandler, because it wasn't a great game for him this past week, but he at least dominated the touches, right? Alexander Madison was back in the lineup, but was barely involved. He had two touches for, I think, -1 yard. Again, it's not the worst matchup here against Green Bay, who are allowing 4.5 yards per carry to running backs, which is 24th in the league. They're allowing a 13.9% explosive run rate as well, which is near the bottom of the league and 27th as well. So there's potential here for Ty Chandler if he's going to continue with that workload that we saw these past couple of weeks. But there's not a lot of Minnesota options anymore that I'm willing to trust.
No, it's just kind of like watching dominoes fall at this point. It's really challenging. Now, maybe the entire offense gets a little bit of a boost because Jair Alexander benched for one game
Mm,
by this Packers organization for conduct. What did they say? Detrimental to the team. Something with the coin
yeah,
flip. It was a very
right.
weird situation. So he's going to be out in this game, but I don't necessarily think it's the biggest boost, especially considering, they're missing a quarterback. They're missing their, top tight end option who has been a very capable receiver. I think you're obviously starting Justin Jefferson. Hopefully we see Jaron Hall just kind of toss it up to Justin Jefferson each and every down.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it's very slim pickings. I don't know. Is there concern with Addison's ankle injury that he could miss? I haven't really gotten a great vibe on whether or not we think that this is going to be something that holds him out for the week.
Yeah, I originally wasn't feeling great about it. Obviously, didn't practice on Wednesday, and I still don't see anything for Thursday for Jordan Addison. So, I mean, if he plays, like, he'd probably be somebody that is more in that wide receiver three range for me, but like really low end wide receiver three range, because he's a great player. It's still his rookie season. He's already shown a lot of promise here, but the problem is just the quarterback situation, right? But it at least gives another option for them to throw to. Whereas I don't think I'm trusting really anybody else outside of Justin Jefferson if Addison doesn't play. So if he plays, he's at least somebody that I could feel okay about starting, but probably trying to avoid him for the most part.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Man, what a disappointing sort of state of things for the Vikings fans
It
out there.
is.
So much promise, so much talent on their offense, but you hate to see these injuries that have just piled up because man, if this offense hadn't been derailed by injuries, like I think we would they'd be atop of the league in offensive production. And I don't know that it'd be close at this point. So like I my heart goes out to all of our listeners that are part of the Vikings skull, uh, whatever we call them. my heart goes out to you because there's so much lost potential in this team. And yeah, Justin Jefferson at this point, the last man standing.
He is, yeah. And if there is going to be a last man standing, we're glad it's Justin Jefferson. But yeah, just don't love everything that's going around him there. And then another team that's pretty banged up on offense as well, the Green Bay Packers, right? So Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, these guys are all banged up. And it doesn't make things look great for the Green Bay passing offense either, right? So Jordan Love, who's had some very usable fantasy quarterback weeks recently, I don't know that I'm necessarily trusting him against the Vikings, especially considering his options this week, where we don't know if these guys are even going to play. I think Christian Watson didn't practice on Thursday, neither did Dontavian Wicks. Jaden Reed was limited on Wednesday. I haven't seen anything for him on Thursday. I just don't know. I mean, Aaron Jones has been excellent. At least last week he was dominant. Of course, didn't get the touchdowns because AJ Dillon and Jordan Love both vultured him at different times. But Aaron Jones at least looked like the Aaron Jones that we've been hoping to see in recent weeks, and that was at least promising. So I feel like he's a starter for fantasy purposes, as is maybe Tucker Kraft, who could be one of the top options here, assuming Luke Musgrave doesn't become active in this game, which could complicate things. But otherwise, Tucker Kraft has been solid and could be like one of those low end tight end one options as well.
Yeah, Tucker Kraft actually been phenomenal. Last 3 weeks, 55 plus receiving yards, 4 catches in each of those games. Like he's had a really safe floor, very safe level of involvement here overall in this Packers offense over the past 3 weeks, which you love to see. And again, that could be even more so the case heading into this matchup, given their situation at receipt at this point in the week, while Wicks and Watson both aren't practicing. Romeo Dobbs could be in an interesting spot for a lot of volume, and maybe also Jaden Reed. We'll kind of see how that shakes out, but still not necessarily like this high scoring matchup that I'm going all in on because I want a share of the points. This is still a divisional game, and you're dealing with a backup quarterback on one side. How much are they going to be able to produce against this Packers defense? How much are the Packers going to need to respond with a pass heavy game script? How is this going to shake out? I don't know. And it's going to be really, really difficult to trust here if, in this must win situation.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like I can feel comfortable about starting Aaron Jones just because, again, we saw that volume last week, 21 carries, but I think there's definitely going to be potential for them to run the ball again this week. But yeah, as far as the passing offense goes, like you said, Tucker Kraft has been great, but there's not a lot of other guys that I feel comfortable with. This week, anybody else from this final game for you? No.
Key business, man. And if your lineups come down to this final game in week 17, you're going to be sweating it out because
Yeah.
this is one of I think the tougher games on this slate in the week to kind of figure out what you're about to get just because of the number of injuries, number of variables. So I'm going to hope your matchups are settled ahead of this outing. So maybe you can just kick back and watch some backup quarterback, backup everything
Yeah.
option for the Vikings and the young blood offense that the Packers have to offer.
Yeah, yeah, it's either going to be very, very stressful for you or just like chillax, relaxing football that you won't care because you'll either secured a fantasy championship and you can live with watching some backup players, like you said. But yeah, it should be fun either way. See how things go. But that is going to wrap up our final weekly preview episode of the season. Thank you all so much for listening and or watching on the YouTube all year long. We appreciate every single one of you who tunes in each week. I understand that, there are a million different fantasy podcasts to choose from. I'm just very thankful that you've chosen to make us one of your listening options. So hopefully you'll be able to win a fantasy championship as well. And hopefully we've been helpful in doing so. A big thanks to Kate as well, without whom I could not do this show. So Kate, as always, thank you for always doing this preview show with me. Thank you for a fun season. It's been a blast, and really glad we could get you on here every week, not just for my sake, but for the listeners as well, because you always do a great job. So thank you very much.
It's been a great season. I'm grateful to have been there. Stay tuned. I've got one more article this week to help you match those titles here. Some sleeper options, just in case you're decimated by one of the many injuries we talked about today. I'll try to slate you up with some backup options here to help you get that trophy, and we're gonna keep it rolling. We're gonna get you that championship, folks.
Absolutely. Yes. And enjoy the games this week. Enjoy Thursday night football tonight between the Browns and the Jets. I'm sure there's no way that one could disappoint. Good luck in the fantasy football finals, everybody. I really hope you all win a championship this weekend. Have a happy new year as well. And until next time, until 2024, peace out.